Chaz and John square up to the Oval Office.
Let's explain that, Lana.
I understand it better than anybody.
Great! Facing the facts.
Fake news. How big is that team?
Absorbing the leaks.
Need to show some privacy. It's cute that you're worried about leaks in the Trump administration.
Tirelessly seeking the true truth about the state of the states.
The White House has so many knives out, it's like a late-night infomercial.
Set the controls for Planet America tonight on ABC News. Welcome to Insiders.
Sunday, all the fallout from the South Australian election.
The major party vote is declining in this country.
And all the inside info from the political circus.
The ghastly press gallery sitting here this morning.
The government's keeping its head. It means the government's keeping its head.
What does that mean?
Insiders, Sunday on ABC News.
4 hours a day, every day.
UK-Russia relations have disintegrated overnight over the poisoning of a former spy.
From across Australia and around the world.
We can't have what happened in Parkland, Florida happen ever again.
Border Force Commissioner Roman Quadzalay has been sacked.
The news you need to know.
Residents stranded as floodwaters gush through the streets.
From the news team you know you can trust.
ABC News, London.
Tokyo, Moscow, Rome.
Islamabad.
He made these incredibly original insights. He was a huge figure.
I think I'm speaking for the people who has no chance to speak up.
The 64th annual River Parade has the usual eclectic mix of fun and excitement.
On the Marshall Islands, we're seeing some real tangible effects right now from climate change.
As it happens, when it matters.
Know the story with ABC News.
Sydney in lockdown as Asian leaders gathered to talk about the future of the region. The furor over Peter Dutton's push to save persecuted white South African farmers. Too tough to call, no clear frontrunner on the eve of the South Australian election. And a Sydney man fined over having a public transport card implanted in his body. Hello, welcome to Evenings on ABC News. I'm Karina Carvalho. The heart of Sydney is bracing for a major security lockdown as Asian leaders gather for the ASEAN summit. Hosting the 10-member ASEAN group is a rare honour for non-members, and at least one leader, Indonesia's Joko Widodo, thinks Australia could one day join their ranks permanently. Political reporter Stephen Jedgetts is covering the talks.
Hello, good morning.
Could the host one day join the club? Australian diplomats, foreign ministers and even prime ministers have mused for years about joining the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the major summit for the region's leaders. The main problem, Asian nations have been, at best, lukewarm about the idea. Could that be changing? The Indonesian president surprised everyone today, telling newspapers he'd like to see Australia join the summit.
Should there ever be a time where Australia were given the honour of being offered membership in ASEAN, of course we would take such an offer very seriously.
But other Indonesian heavyweights are more ambivalent.
The partnership between Australia and ASEAN will continue to grow.
And even Malcolm Turnbull isn't holding his breath.
ASEAN matters are a matter for ASEAN.
The main reason Australia's unlikely to ever join ASEAN is that getting in is very difficult. The summit works on consensus. So if even one nation wants Australia to stay out, then that's where we'll stay. And that so-called consensus model also makes it difficult for the summit to confront human rights abuses. The UN has accused Myanmar's Aung San Suu Kyi of presiding over ethnic cleansing of Rohingya Muslims, while Cambodia's Hun Sen has locked up lawmakers and journalists. Expect public denunciations from protesters, but not from leaders.
We respect the centrality of ASEAN in our region. We respect the consensus model upon which it's based.
Some things are only said in private. Stephen Jedgetts, ABC News, Sydney.
South Africa has taken Australia to task for wanting to accept its white citizens as refugees. It's demanding Peter Dutton retract his offer to take in white South African farmers who he's described as persecuted. At home, the minister's interest in the foreign farmers has opened him to accusations he's resurrecting a white Australia policy. Here's political editor Andrew Probyn.
Racial disparities in land ownership have long been a flashpoint in South Africa. But white South African farmers are increasingly anxious about their president's vow to hasten land reform.
The taking of land without compensation is one of those mechanisms.
In raising the spectre of forced seizures of white-owned farms, Cyril Ramaphosa echoes a firebrand political rival.
We hurt you and take from you without a drop of blood.
But blood has spilled, and white farmers are fearful. Australia's Home Affairs Minister not only has a name for what's happening to the white South African farmers, but is offering safe haven.
I think in this circumstance, we do have to look at the persecution that's taking place. They contribute and make us a better country, and they're the sorts of migrants that we want to bring into that country.
Cyril Ramaphosa's government is furious with Peter Dutton, especially his comment that white farmers needed help from a civilised country. The South African government is offended by the statements and a full retraction is expected, its foreign ministry said. In Pretoria, Australia's High Commissioner was hauled in to explain the basis of Mr Dutton's comments. But Mr Dutton has his backers back home.
Like I supported 12,000 Iraqi and Syrian refugees, I also support white South African farmers who appear to be systematically persecuted and driven from their properties.
Peter Dutton wants to bring back the white Australia policy.
Only a grub would introduce the question of race in this circumstance.
Queensland Liberal Andrew Laming says he's been worried by reports white farmers were victims of state-sponsored persecution.
By mercenaries who are potentially being trained by the state.
This is not a dog whistle, this is a foghorn.
Peter Dutton's comments have not only infuriated the South African government, but caused tension inside cabinet. It's understood Foreign Minister Julie Bishop is worried he's unnecessarily inflamed an important relationship. But the Prime Minister is not buying into it. He says Australia's humanitarian program is wholly non-discriminatory. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
South Australians go to the polls tomorrow with the rare option of 3 major parties to vote for. While Labor is chasing a historic 5th term, it faces a strong challenge from the Liberals and former Senator Nick Xenophon's SA Best party.
It's an ordinary garage in a beachside suburb, but in March last year it became the focus of the nation's media.
It's a disgrace the way in which your government has treated our state.
Today, Jay Weatherill returned to the scene with a special gift for the homeowner.
He was coming along thinking he had the leverage because the Prime Minister just made that announcement, but, he was there doing it.
The Premier admits the day was a turning point in his energy campaign after power failures put the government under pressure.
What happened is that our energy plan was so strong and so cogent and demonstrated such leadership that it completely paralysed Stephen Marshall and the opposition.
While Mr Weatherill was trying to highlight a Labor campaign win, opposition leader Stephen Marshall had a different take.
I think he's getting pretty desperate. I mean, the reality is to highlight any aspect of Labor's plans around energy, to me, is a disaster.
From the early hours of this morning, Mr Marshall has been visiting local businesses, making sure his message on tax cuts through.
The people of South Australia should unequivocally vote for the Liberal Party, vote for their local Liberal candidate.
Nick Xenophon was back in form with an array of stunts at his last campaign press conference.
Said he never get anywhere. They don't care and it's just not fair.
Dave Gleeson from the Screaming Jets came along to help dispute claims made in the campaign that the party's poker machines policy will hurt live music, which are, in Mr Xenophon's words, bull.
There's a serious purpose behind this stunt, and that is to say people have had enough of the bull that's been thrown at me and SA Best and our candidates.
It remains one of the more unpredictable campaigns in South Australian history. Leah McLennan, ABC News, Adelaide.
And you can follow South Australia's election as it happens right here on the ABC News channel. Annabelle Crabb, Nick Harmson and Anthony Green will have full coverage of what's shaping up to be a tight three-way contest. That's tomorrow evening from 6:30 Eastern Daylight Time. The United States, France and Germany are backing Britain in blaming Moscow for the nerve agent attack on English soil. Relations between the UK and President Vladimir Putin's government have deteriorated further, with the British Defence Secretary telling the Russians to shut up and go away. Europe correspondent Lisa Miller reports.
It was the first time the Prime Minister had come to the medieval city that's still a crime scene.
We do hold Russia culpable for this brazen act and despicable act that's taken place on the streets of what is such a remarkable city.
There is no sense of this diplomatic dispute being resolved quickly.
Frankly, Russia should go away, it should shut up. But if they do respond to the action that we've taken, we'll consider it carefully.
The UK can be confident it now has the rock-solid backing of powerful friends, with the US, France and Germany stating they abhor the attack that took place as an assault on UK sovereignty, and they share the UK assessment that Russia was responsible.
It's a very sad situation. It certainly looks like the Russians were behind it. Something that should never, ever happen, and we're taking it very seriously, as I think are many others.
The joint statement is significant. This is the first time a nerve agent has been used in Europe since World War II, and they see it as a threat against everyone's security. But words are one thing, tangible actions are another.
France says it will reveal its plans within days. Vladimir Putin met with the members of his National Security Council. They will retaliate over Britain's sanctions and expulsions, but haven't said when.
We are going to talk about retaliatory measures that we will take. We are working on them at the moment, and we will take them as soon as possible.
Russia is under pressure on another front. The US has announced new sanctions against 24 individuals and entities for interfering in the 2016 election and launching cyber attacks. Lisa Miller, ABC News, London.
Let's return to Sydney now for more on the build-up to the ASEAN summit. Several hundred people have gathered at Hyde Park tonight to protest over the visit of the Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen. Nadia Daly is there. Nadia, what's the latest?
Protesters are here just a stone's throw away from a hotel in Sydney where the Cambodian Prime Minister is said to be holding meetings right now. He personally warned protesters not to come out and demonstrate his presence here in Sydney. He said he would personally hunt them down and bash them if they did so, but obviously they're not feeling threatened by that. They've turned out here in the hundreds. There would be around 200 or so people here in Hyde Park in Sydney, and they say they're not scared to stand up and protest against what they say is an erosion of democracy in Cambodia, an increasingly authoritarian regime, and events such as the recent arrest of an opposition leader. So they're here calling for Australia to take a tougher stance against the Cambodian Prime Minister while he's here in Australia for the ASEAN summit. Here's what some of those gathered here today for the protest had to say just a little earlier.
Hun Sen have done so much damage to my country. One thing very important, he doesn't respect democracy.
It's not welcome here because this is a real democratic country, and he's been running Cambodia for nearly 40 years. You know, all he does is suppress his opposition, killing his opponent.
Australian government and international community should unite and stand against the brutalities, the abuse of human rights.
Nadia, how is security being stepped up in the city?
Well, there will be an increased security presence across Sydney for the ASEAN summit this weekend. Already today, police have closed some roads, and there's been an increased presence on foot at this protest right now. There are several police on horseback and on foot, and there's even the riot squad here today. It's the first time Australia has hosted the ASEAN summit, so police are seemingly trying to ensure that everything goes smoothly and that security is sufficiently tight. These sort of protests of world leaders do, of course, attract lots of protests. We've got the leaders of 10 Southeast Asian countries here. This protest here tonight has been quite peaceful so far, and it's just been a stationary protest in Hyde Park. So there is a heavy police presence, but so far this has been a very peaceful protest here tonight.
If not a little noisy, Nadia Daly there at Hyde Park in Sydney. A Sydney man who identifies as a cyborg and a biohacker has been fined for using the chip from a public transport card implanted in his arm to travel. Lawyers representing the man have argued the law has not kept pace with technology.
Meow Ludo Disco Gamma Meow Meow arrived at court without technological assistance this morning. The 33-year-old had an Opal card chip surgically implanted into his hand last year to make commuting more convenient. He pleaded guilty to using public transport without a valid ticket and not producing a ticket to transport officers. His lawyer argued implantable technology should be legalised on the transport network like other methods of contactless payment such as MasterCard. The magistrate was unconvinced. I accept technology is advancing, but anybody who is travelling today must comply with the laws of today. Mr. Meow Meow was fined $220 for breaching the terms of use by tampering with the Opal card. He was also ordered to pay $1,000 in legal costs.
Clearly technology is moving in this direction. This wouldn't be a case in a year or two's time.
Despite today's decision, Mr. Meow Meow says he won't stop experimenting with implanted technology. He's planning to push the boundary even further, replacing his Opal chip with one that will hold all his personal information, including credit cards and memberships.
I will be upgrading this card. So there's a new product that the guy who made these is coming out with that enables you to store about 100 different cards.
He says until then, he'll be putting his cyborg ambitions on pause and using the regular single-trip tickets. Lily Mayers, ABC News, Sydney.
Well, joining me to discuss humans modifying their bodies with technology is futurist Ross Dawson. Ross Dawson, thanks for your time tonight. The most interesting part of this story, I think, is that Mr. Meow Meow is going to persist with implanting chips. And is that the future?
Well, this is the very threshold of us modifying ourselves, and there's other companies in the United States and Sweden where their employees have volunteered to be implanted with chips so that they can get in and out of facilities and buy things and so on. It's a convenience thing. But where it goes beyond this is that there are going to be more and more ways in which we can modify ourselves in ways which are a little bit more useful than just being able to get onto the bus without taking our card out. For example, being able to have direct interfaces to our brain, being able to modify our genes and so on. So this points to a world where, this is the very threshold now when we will start to see some choosing to modify themselves in this way as in many other ways, and others saying that they prefer to be as they were born and be pure humans.
Yeah, so do you think that will happen? You say we're right there on the cusp of it. Will it happen quickly or will it happen slowly?
This will take quite some time to pass out, and part of it is that it has to be some real use to it. The reality is that it is, there's not vastly useful to be able to implant a chip in your hand to get on the bus as opposed to have one in your pocket. It's that very small.
Mr. Meow Meow saying that now he wants to implant a chip in himself that is similar to a credit card, so he can use it not just for catching public transport, but for purchasing goods.
Yeah, and so this starts to be a little more useful for that. But where it starts to become really useful is when we can enhance our capabilities. And there is a lot of research going on in brain, ways to be able to interface our brains directly with computers, some of which will start to require actual implants. And already there are paraplegics and quadriplegics who can, in fact, control their environment through brain implants. Now, they have a particular reason to do that. But as with these advance, people who are not disabled may start to choose to modify themselves to have brain implants so they can give themselves greater capabilities, greater memory, greater ability to think, which might even give them an advantage in the workplace, for example.
The brain implant you're talking about for people with disabilities, you can see the actual advantages with something like that. What are some of the problems that you see for people who aren't using it for that particular reason going forward?
Well, it is still very risky. So this is there is a danger, and so those who are taking that risk as disabled people is for the potential very large advantage to be able to control their lives. But beyond that, it's really around there's more additional potential.
And personal freedoms.
Well, in terms of so for example, with Meow Ludo's chip in his hand, so this enables him to be tracked. And this is a choice which he is making. There are other ways in which we can address these privacy issues. And we do need to understand that as we become embedded with technologies, that this takes away our privacy or potentially security. But these are design issues in how we do this so that they do augment our capabilities and are things which are positive for us, and so they are choices that we make.
Do you think the law will have to change in order to keep up with this? Because this was one of the key things in the case, was that it's not that he didn't pay for his ride on the public transport, it was that he didn't physically have the card. So is that one of the things where the law is going to have to change to keep up with technology?
Absolutely, and part of the point which Mr. Meow Meow was making is that the law is behind technology, and this is one of many, many cases where that is true. So he is pushing those boundaries, and we do need to start to be able to form law that does start to at least keep up with technology, particularly, and the point which is making around our individual rights, our rights to modify ourselves, in this case in a very simple way, but going forward we will need law which enables us as individuals to express our desire to be who we are.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I should be excited or scared. Ross Dawson, thanks for your time tonight.
My pleasure.
Well, stay with us. Coming up, find out why the Australian Federal Police seized more than 1,000 mobile phones, and the terrible moment a newly built bridge collapses on a highway in Florida.